I have, for a very, very long time, been in the fandom of Hetalia, Axis Powers Hetalia. Um, I think ever since I was a teenager. And Auf Wiedersehen Sweetheart is kind of a mythological fan fiction in this fandom. It was written by George DeValier. That's how I would pronounce it, but I guess in English maybe you would pronounce it DeValier or something. Um, and so George DeValier, he or she or they wrote a series of fan fictions depicting several ships. Mainly, we have US UK, so America and England. Uh, we have Spamano, so that's Spain and Romano or South Italy. And the one that's going to interest us in this story, we have Gerita, so that's Germany and Italy. This is a story in a human AU. So our characters are not nations; they are human, and it happens during World War II. So trigger warning: if you are uncomfortable at all with anything that has to do with World War II, there is mention of all of that. If you are in the Hetalia fandom, I doubt that you have a lot of sensitivities about it, because the anime revolves around World War II a lot, especially in the earlier seasons. Um, but just as a warning, if anyone happens to not know that. Um, so we're going to only read the first chapter today because it is already a little bit late where I am. Uh, and I just want to see how this format sounds like, how this format looks. So we're going to read the first chapter. Not a lot of warnings for this chapter. However, we do have an encounter with a German soldier. So some threats of violence, and mentions of the war, mentions of the resistance. Um, and yeah, that's about it. Um, I have seen that there is some controversy about depicting World War II in fan fiction. So just please be kind, please be civil uh, about it. Uh, this is just fiction. All right, so let's get started. I am using the version that was republished on AO3 because maybe you don't know, but the original version of the fanfiction, which was posted to fanfiction.net, was removed by the author with no real explanation. Everything is gone. The account was deleted. But Auf Wiedersehen Sweetheart is such an important fanfiction in the fandom that it was downloaded and copied and reposted in many, many places, including AO3. And it's one of my websites of preference when it comes to reading fanfiction. I'm just going to read the note of the person who reposted it. So it was reposted by the legend himself, I think. Maybe not. Well, the author is called George DeValier Archive, but I imagine that the legend himself is the person responsible for re-uploading it. So this person says, I claim no ownership of this fic whatsoever. It was written by George DeValier, and Hetalia of course belongs to Hideka's Himeria. I mean, this fic stole my heart, but I'm not trying to steal anything. All the other notes following this are the original ones by George DeValier. They are there in order to preserve as much as possible of the original. I'm not trying to masquerade as him in any way, shape, or form. George, and Auf Wiedersehen Sweetheart in particular, literally inspired me to write and showed me the emotional impact stories can have. So nothing but respect for this dude. Anyway, enjoy the fic. As you can see, this was a very, very influential fan fiction. So let's get started. Oh, just a little disclaimer before we start. There is some German and some Italian in the text, and unfortunately, I do not speak either German or Italian, and I do not know how most words are pronounced. So if I completely butcher the language, I am absolutely sorry about it. I will do my best. Um, and if I make a huge mistake, you feel free to correct me. All right, let's get started. So, Auf Wiedersehen Sweetheart, Chapter 1. Oh, I am going to switch the music. Before we start, I put in the background some Italian music, just so we can be in the mood. But I want the more neutral type. If that's at the beginning. All right, there we go. Because the start of the chapter is not so happy. All right, let's go. Chapter 1. Feliciano did not know what else to do. Couldn't this shouting officer see that he obviously didn't speak German? Feliciano tried again, waving his little white flag even faster. He always carried it for these sorts of situations, but today it did not seem to be working. I don't understand you, kinda Dutch. I really would like to answer you, but I have no idea what you're saying. Sprechen Sie Italienisch? English? This did not work either. The German just yelled louder. Feliciano cringed under the verbal assault and tried to shrink even smaller. This was completely unfair. All he'd wanted to do was walk to the village market to buy flour, and he'd been stopped on the road by this loud German soldier who seemed incredibly angry about something and wouldn't stop yelling at him in the unfamiliar language. Feliciano was used to seeing the Germans in and around the village by now, but he had never had to deal with something like this before. He was terrified. I'm sorry, cried Feliciano as the German grew even angrier, his voice rising to a deafening volume. I don't know what you... Feliciano's heart stopped in his chest when the German pulled his gun from its holster. The entire street and surrounding fields seemed to turn on their side, but the soldier didn't point the weapon. Instead, he lifted it above his head, and Feliciano watched as the butt of the gun moved swiftly towards him. He closed his eyes and braced for the impact. It didn't come. Instead, the sound of another German speaking reached his ears, and Feliciano risked opening an eye and peeking upwards. This new German was tall, big, blonde, and spoke angrily to the soldier, whose arm he held in a firm grip. He seemed to have come from nowhere. Feliciano watched wide-eyed as the blonde officer spoke a few more angry words before releasing the soldier and dismissing him curtly. The soldier saluted hastily and hurried away. Feliciano grasped his little white flag, took a deep breath, and waited edgily to see what would happen next. The officer looked down at him and started to speak in German, but broke off. After a few tensed moments, he asked, I don't suppose you speak English. Feliciano breathed a sigh of relief. Oh, thank goodness. Yes, I speak English. That soldier, he kept yelling at me and I didn't know what he wanted and he was really loud and angry and scary and thank you so much for stopping him from hitting me and are you going to arrest me? The German looked a little dazed. You're welcome. No, I'm not going to arrest you. Oh, good. Feliciano smiled, and the officer paused before continuing. I'm sorry about him. He wanted to see your identification papers. Oh, said Feliciano, scrambling to retrieve the papers from his back pocket. I have them here. No. The German held up his hands, palms outward. My bad. It's fine, really. Are you all right? Feliciano smiled again. This was the nicest German soldier he had ever encountered, even if he was very stern looking and he didn't smile. Yes, I'm fine, thank you. The German nodded perfunctorily. You're welcome, he said again. Feliciano waited, but the German didn't continue and just looked down at him intently. Feliciano felt his breath come faster as he stared back. It almost felt like the German was looking right through him. His eyes were the bluest thing Feliciano had ever seen. So, said Feliciano finally, feeling like he was breaking his spell in speaking. Can I keep going to the market now? Because I'm worried. I'm supposed to buy flour and I'm already late and I don't want my grandpa to get worried. The German blinked a few times and his eyes finally flicked up to look past Feliciano. Please. He gestured for Feliciano to walk past. Thank you, nice German soldier man. Feliciano ran past, continuing down the narrow country road towards the village. After a few steps, unsure why, he turned to look back. The German was watching after him, but he quickly turned away. Feliciano decided it must be his lucky day. After the incident with the German soldiers, he managed to find plenty of flour to buy at the market, plus apples, and even a tiny bit of sugar, which had been almost impossible to find since the start of the war. Feliciano ran cheerfully out of the village, waving to the locals as he went, and headed back down the narrow dirt road to his little farmhouse. The late afternoon sun bathed the streets, the trees, and the wide open fields in a warm orange glow, and Feliciano hummed happily to himself as he swung his basket of groceries at his side. He loved the countryside on days like this. He could almost forget the constant German presence in the village, almost not hear the sound of bombs exploding in echoes off in the mountains, almost let his eyes skim over the side of the broken down and burnt out tank on the side of the road. It was almost peaceful. As he walked, Feliciano wondered what had made the German officer stop the soldier from hitting him earlier. Feliciano had not had much to do with the Germans, trying desperately to avoid them, but his grandpa and brother always told him that they were all horrible and nasty and evil. That officer certainly hadn't seemed horrible or evil at all. Feliciano couldn't help wondering if he would ever see him again. But he shouldn't think that. He shouldn't care. So why on earth did he? Feliciano turned into the lane that led to his front door and was immediately greeted by the sound of laughter and singing. He smiled and ran up to the house. As he walked into the crowded front room, he was greeted by cheers. Lovino stood on the table in the center of the room, playing his guitar and leading the crowd in a rousing revolutionary song. Feliciano laughed. Lovino must be very drunk already. The room was not large, and seemed even smaller when it was full of celebrating revolutionaries. Sorry, my cat keeps interrupting me. Grandpa Roma crossed the room and took the basket from Feliciano before replacing it with a bottle of wine and pulling him into a hug. Welcome home, Feliciano. Okay, I will be right back. There we go. Sorry about this, guys. My cat is a world champion in door destroying. I don't know. She keeps breaking in and out of places, of rooms when the door is closed. It's It's a whole thing. Let's continue. Sorry about this interruption. The room was not large, and seemed even smaller when it was full of celebrating revolutionaries. Grandpa Roma crossed the room and took the basket from Feliciano before replacing it with a bottle of wine and pulling him into a hug. Welcome home, Feliciano. Oh, you got apples and sugar. Good boy. Grandpa, what's going on? Asked Feliciano, wondering what the crowd could be celebrating this evening. Today is a good day for free Italy. Feliciano knew what that meant. He'd heard it enough times by now. Sorry, guys. What was the price today? A shipment of ammunition coming out from the mountains. Roma turned and yelled to the room. That's one load of bullets the Germans won't be firing! The room erupted in cheers once again. Feliciano applauded with them, but this time his heart wasn't quite in it. Were there many of you? Is everyone all right? The losses were all on the Germans today. Roma grasped Feliciano's hand and raised it along with the wine bottle in a salute. He took a deep sip before finally releasing Feliciano's hand. 3 drivers, 7 guards. Your old grandpa took down 3 of them single-handedly. Well done, Grandpa! Feliciano took a swig of the wine and tried to think through the loud singing and talking and cheering of the room full of revolutionaries. He never used to think about it. Grandpa always said that the only good German soldier was a dead German soldier. But Feliciano suddenly thought, those soldiers who had been killed could have been just like the German he had met on the road today. It was strange. Grandpa had told him plenty of times about soldiers he had killed, and Feliciano hadn't given it a second thought. But now that evil German he had been taught to hate had a face with eyes as blue as the sky. So drink, Feli, and celebrate another victory for La Resistenza. The loud and excited resistance members cheered again. Feliciano knew all of them. Villagers and farmers who opposed the German military presence in Italy and had joined forces to fight against them and sabotage their operations. They often met in the Vargas farmstead or a small cantina in the village, usually to plan a mission or to celebrate one accomplished. They were La Resistenza, the Italian resistance, and they were currently among the most wanted people in Italy. Stopping German supplies, bombing cars and tanks, gathering important tactical information, La Resistenza worked tirelessly to sabotage the efforts of the German military in Italy. And when they celebrated, it was with the same passion and thoroughness. Lovino finished the chorus of the song, jumped down from the table, and threw an arm around Feliciano. Hey, Feli! Feliciano was right. Lovino certainly had drunk too much wine already. He was only ever this happy and sociable after a few drinks and a decisive victory. You weren't involved in the operation today, were you? Asked Feliciano, suddenly concerned. It was bad enough that Grandpa always went out and put himself in such risk and danger. He did not want to have to worry about his brother as well. Lovino rolled his eyes. If only! Lovino turned to Roma. When are you going to let me go out with you on a real mission, Grandpa? I'm sick of just planting bombs in cars. I want to see a little more action. Roma just laughed and threw his free arm around Lovino. You know I don't like to see my beloved grandsons in danger, said Roma, hugging both Feliciano and Lovino close. Feliciano laughed. Grandpa did not need to worry about him. He was the first to admit that he tried to stay far away from danger at all times. He still contributed to the movement, usually by acquiring what information he could from the local villagers about the German movements in the area. Feliciano was grateful that Grandpa Roma tried to keep him safe, but at the same time he was aware that sometimes he was still treated as though he was a little child. Lovino, on the other hand, had been desperate to get out and into the action for years. Even though Grandpa kept telling him that the purpose of the resistance was to be seen as little as possible and that face-to-face conflicts were rare. But with every small increase in responsibility Grandpa allowed Lovino, He only ever wanted more. Next time, Lovino, I promise you, said Roma, smiling cheerfully and ruffling Lovino's hair. You always say that, grumbled Lovino, knocking Roma's hand away. Roma just laughed and took the guitar from Lovino's hands. Cheer up, Lovino! Celebrate and sing with us! Roma strummed the guitar, turned and bowed to the room, and started playing an immediately recognizable melody. The crowded room erupted into cheers of appreciation. Then Roma burst into a song that was by now so familiar to them all. I'm going to pause the music for this one because it's just, it's just too iconic not to sing it outright, I mean. Una mattina mi son svegliato, oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. Una mattina mi son svegliato e ho trovato l'invasor. The revolutionaries joined in. Lovino, drunk on wine and exhilaration, seemed to immediately forget his annoyance and started dancing with one of the local girls. Feliciano couldn't help being carried away. He drank wine from the bottle and joined in the singing. He greeted various people cheerfully when they walked over to speak to him. He laughed and celebrated and listened to tales of victories, then shouted loudly along with everyone for Grandpa Roma to play the song again. He danced and cheered and sang the song over and over until the final verse, which everyone sung so loudly, Feliciano was sure that it would be heard even in the village. E questo il fiore del partigiano. No, wait, sorry, that's the last verse. E questo il fiore del partigiano. Oh bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, ciao, ciao. E questo il fiore del partigiano, morto per la libertà. That night, exhausted, full, and happy, Feliciano lay trying to sleep, with Lovino's snores coming from the bed beside his. He'd spent the night eating, drinking, talking, and singing songs of Italian freedom with the local resistance. But as he closed his eyes and contentedly drifted off to sleep, the last image to drift through his head was that of a blonde-haired, blue-eyed German officer, standing in the sunlight and looking down at him. There we go. Okay, so that was the first chapter of Auf Wiedersehen Sweetheart by George DeValier. It's actually still a little bit early, so I think maybe we can go ahead and read the next one. But first, I usually like to talk a little bit about the chapters and about the stories that I've just read. So what is there to say about this fanfiction? Well, a lot, really, to be honest. Well, mostly surrounding the context. You kind of need to have some guts to write about such a time period because it's, well, as I said before, it's kind of controversial. I'm going to put on a little bit of music again. There we go. It's a little bit controversial because of what happened at the time about Nazism. It's just a very, very dark period of history, whatever country you are focused on. The countries of the Axis, of course, but also I'm French, so there's a lot of complicated history that has to do with World War II in France. Britain and America have their own shit. There's all the colonies that had to join in the war effort, and sometimes they're not treated well. It's just a really, really messy time period. It's very, very dark, and it's not like people have not tried to write about it before, even romance. I'm thinking about, for example, Lettres Françaises, which is a novel that was written about a French woman who lived in one of the occupied regions of France and was forced to welcome a German officer into her home, because that's what they did. They would force people to house them in the places that were occupied. And this woman eventually falls in love with the German officer, and it's very, very sad and messy and complicated. I did enjoy the story, but you know, the women who did fall in love with German officers, because there were some, there were, and they were notorious, they were shamed to hell and back at the end of the war. They had their hair shaven. It was a whole thing. It was very, very messy. So it takes a lot of guts to write about this time period. Well, that to say, this is fan fiction, so it's not supposed to be that serious. But still, uh, I feel like I had a point. I think I might have lost it. Sorry, guys, that happens sometimes. Um, so yeah, so writing about this context is kind of complicated, and you kind of have to be pretty brave to do so. Uh, it's not really something that you can make light of. At the same time, I don't feel like this fan fiction in particular makes light of the time period. Um, we haven't seen this in the first chapter yet, but there, you know, I feel like it doesn't misrepresent the danger and the fear that the people who lived in occupied regions um, must have felt at the time. And at the same time, I do enjoy people writing about people from the German army. I know I have seen a lot of people say that you you can't write people in the German army as sympathetic characters because they were all Nazis. And to an extent they were. That's true. Because, you know, they were fighting for the Nazi regime. So it was not, you know, by definition they were part of it. At the same time, well, you know, I do think that it takes a lot of strength to stand up to something you know is wrong. Um, and I feel like for a lot of the people who were in the army, or maybe, or at least some of them, I feel like that should be the case. It was not a matter of belief, it was a matter of duty. And that's definitely something that we see with the character of Ludwig in the story. But well, I think that might be a bit too touchy of a debate to talk about in the stream. Um, so yeah. One thing that's very important, of course, in the story is the relationship between Feliciano and Ludwig. That's the core of the story. And if we only focus on this story as a love story, then I feel like it's well done. In the first chapter, we have the premise, and it's a very, very slow premise. The characters don't even know each other's names yet. And yet we have what is definitely a sort of love at first sight. Feliciano immediately starts remembering and thinking of his tall, beautiful German soldier, and it's sweet how it he thinks about it, and it starts to change his point of view about the war, about the sides, about how everything works. I just think it's interesting. Okay. I'm not going to go too deep into that. We're just going to continue. And so we're going to start chapter 2. And I think we'll stop at that for tonight. All right. Let's see. There we go. So, Auf Wiedersehen Sweetheart, chapter 2. I don't think there's a lot of trigger warnings for this chapter. I think it's a pretty calm one. There's still talk of the war, of course. Again, if that's a touchy subject for you, please approach this with caution. Anyway, let's get into this. Feliciano walked to the market every afternoon. It was his favorite time of the day. His grandpa always told him to walk straight, look at the ground, don't dawdle, speak to no one, hurry back. But Feliciano enjoyed his afternoon walk. He loved to walk through the fields and pick flowers. He loved to chat with the villagers and give the flowers to pretty girls. He loved to run down the dusty country roads, racing the local children. And when the day was done, he loved nothing more than to sit under his favorite oak tree, a few fields over from his house, and just watch the clouds float past in the orange sky. It was as he was nearing the tree, basket in hand and headed to the market, that he noticed the outline of a German soldier walking slowly in the distance. His stomach twisted in knots, and he held tight to his white flag. But as he approached closer, he recognized the soldier as the one who had helped him in the street the day before. His stomach suddenly twisted for an entirely different reason. Oh, we know what reason it is, Feliciano. Okay, I hope I don't butcher the Italian and German in this chapter. Buon pomeriggio, German. The German looked over at Feliciano and raised his eyebrows. He tilted his head slightly in recognition. Buon pomeriggio, Italian. Feliciano felt a little jump in his chest. He knew he should not be greeting German soldiers, but he couldn't help but feel that this German was a kind man. He must be. Feliciano did not feel afraid of him like he did all the others. What brings you to this beautiful part of Italy? Well, not the country as a whole, I know what brings you here, so I suppose I mean, what brings you to this field? I've never seen a German soldier so far outside of town before. The German took a moment to respond. I had this certain urge to take a walk. Feliciano nodded in understanding. That happens to me sometimes. Did you eat too much pasta? The German blinked a few times and furrowed his brow. No. I see. I usually go for a walk after a really big meal. Then I fall asleep under this big oak tree there. And then Livino wakes me up and gets mad at me. Livino is my big brother. Do you have a big brother? The German looked like he was having trouble following the conversation, though Feliciano couldn't see why. He seemed to speak English perfectly. Yes, I do. I think Feliciano may have ADHD or something. Shout out to my dear Lyra! What's your big brother's name? Gilbert. What is your name? Ludwig. I mean, Lieutenant Bielschmidt. I hope this is the right pronunciation. I always see it written out. I don't know how it's pronounced. Pleased to meet you, Ludwig. My name is Feliciano Vargas. Thank you again for stopping that angry man from hitting me yesterday. I'm going to the market to see if there are tomatoes for sale. Would you like to walk with me? Yes, said Ludwig slowly, although he didn't look like he was sure. I'm just heading back that way now. Feliciano felt a happy warmth settled in his stomach as Ludwig fell into step beside him, and they walked slowly together through the field. Feliciano had to stifle a laugh in thinking about what Grandpa Roma and Lovino would have to say about this. Walking to the village with the German soldier. They walked in silence for a few moments, as Feliciano took the time to study the German properly. Ludwig's gray uniform was slightly different to the ones Feliciano was used to seeing, but he recognized it immediately as an officer's. His eyes strayed to the line of decorations on Ludwig's chest, then further, and he could not help noticing that the muscles in Ludwig's arms bulged against the fabric. We have a muscle lover there. Sorry. Feliciano bit his lip, and he had to tell himself to look away. Feeling a bit confused, he quickly shook the feeling away. He breathed the fresh air deeply and swung his empty basket happily, surprised at how comfortable he felt just walking beside this German. He already felt disappointed that once they reached the village, he would probably never see Ludwig again, but that was only to be expected. Ludwig did not seem the talkative type, but Feliciano didn't mind carrying the conversation. He was enjoying the chance to speak in English. "Oh look, the lavender is still blooming. That means it's going to be a short winter, do you know? Which is good, because winter is cold, and I don't like the cold, or the snow, or the rain really, unless it just happens sometimes and I'm inside by the fire. What is the winter like in Germany? Does it rain a lot? I hear that in England it rains nearly all year round. Can you imagine? You could never be able to go outside. I think I would be so bored, don't you? Ludwig, what is the German word for rain?" I hope I represent the speech well. Feliciano looked up to find Ludwig staring down at him with an unreadable expression on his face. Feliciano smiled, and Ludwig quickly looked down at his feet. "It is Regen." Then when Ludwig spoke, his voice was deep and accented. "Regen," repeated Feliciano. The word felt strong in his mouth. "In Italian, it's pioggia. Do you know, I would like to learn German one day." Something clicked in his mind, and his chest flipped. He just stumbled on the perfect way to see Ludwig again. "Oh, Ludwig, I have a brilliant idea. You can teach me German, and I will teach you Italian. What do you think of that?" Ludwig looked at a loss again. Feliciano got the sense that he was not used to the feeling. "I do not even know you." "Of course you do. We're talking, aren't we? Doesn't that make us friends?" Friends. Ludwig seemed to trip over the word. He shook his head. "You are a very strange man. Why do you suddenly think we are friends? I'm a stranger in your country." Feliciano laughed. "Stranger? You're not a stranger, Ludwig. We've met now. And you seem like a very nice person after all. You did help me when you didn't have to, and you're going to teach me German, and you have kind eyes. Are you stationed nearby?" Ludwig was slow to answer. "Yes, but I cannot tell you where." Feliciano smiled. He'd expected as much. Ludwig was obviously not stupid enough to give away such information to someone he had just met. "That is fine. You can't be too far away, though, and that means we can see each other every day, yes? And you can teach me German, and I can teach you Italian, and I'm sure we will become very good friends. You can find me by the big oak tree most days. If I'm asleep, though, make sure you wake me slowly, because I can get very cranky when I'm woken up. But that doesn't stop Lovino from doing it all the time. Big brothers can be very annoying, can't they?" Ludwig made a noise which was almost a laugh. "Yes, I agree with you about that," he said as they walked out of the field and onto the dirt road which led to the village. Feliciano clutched his basket, feeling deliriously happy with every small thing he learned about Ludwig. Feliciano was practically an expert at acquiring information before the informant even realized they had given it. He sometimes used the skill for the cause of the resistance, but it was much nicer to find things out just because he was interested. "Is your brother a soldier like you?" Ludwig spoke concisely and firmly. "My brother is at the Russian front, and he's a soldier. I, however, am not." Feliciano looked up at Ludwig quizzically. "Not a soldier?" "No," said Ludwig. His lips turned up slightly. "I am a pilot." Feliciano's eyes widened. A pilot? I've never met a pilot before. Do you deliver supplies, that sort of thing? No, I'm a fighter pilot. Feliciano tried not to make an embarrassing noise of excitement. A fighter pilot. It sounded like something out of an adventure novel. Something completely different to everything he knew. Something new. That's amazing! Is it difficult? Is it scary? Do you have to wear those funny hats? Have you fought against the English? Feliciano immediately regretted that last question. Ludwig took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, still staring straight ahead. To me, it is not difficult. It is not scary. We wear the required headgear, and yes, I fight the English. Every day. Every day? It seemed inconceivable. Of course. After our failure at the... Oh my gosh, I do not know how to pronounce this. I apologize to any German person who may listen to me speak right now. In the Luftslacht, England. I'm going to hope this was correct. You know what? How about... No, I'm not going to look it up right now. I don't wanna spend too much time on it either. Ludwig did not finish the sentence. I just wish to do the best I can for my country. Feliciano quickly realized he did not want to stay on this subject. He immediately changed it. As they continued walking and talking, Feliciano was surprised by just how much they actually had in common. Ludwig also had an older brother, and had been raised by their grandfather, who had taught him English as a child. He liked animals as well, but he preferred dogs, while Feliciano had always loved cats. He was also from a small village and loved the countryside. Feliciano discovered that they both loved soccer, and Ludwig had even played at near national level before the war. And when he didn't think Feliciano was looking, Ludwig would almost smile, and Feliciano could feel his heart skip a beat. In all the afternoons of all the years that Feliciano had spent walking to the market, this was the best. They walked slowly, but eventually they reached the village and headed down its narrow paved streets towards the market. Stone and wooden buildings closed in on all sides, throwing shadows onto the cobblestones. After a few moments of silence, Feliciano looked over at Ludwig to find that he was studying him intently. He felt himself turn red. Oh, sorry, a little yawn. What is it? How old are you? Asked Ludwig curiously. 19? Why? Are you healthy? Feliciano paused for a moment. What a strange question. I think so. The other day I got a splinter in my finger while I was helping Grandpa with the firewood, and Lovino got it out with a needle, and then he said that sometimes people get sick and die from tiny things like splinters, but I feel fine so far. Have you ever heard of anyone dying from a splinter? Oh, and I had a fever last summer. It didn't last long though, but other than that, yes, I'm quite healthy, thank you. Feliciano waited for Ludwig to continue, but he didn't. He searched for the polite thing to say. And you? Are you healthy? It was a strange topic of conversation, but who knew what they talked about in Germany? What? Yes, Ludwig paused, then shook his head briskly. Nein, what I mean is, if you are of the right age and healthy, why aren't you in the army? Oh, Feliciano shrugged. I don't want to fight. But your country is at war. Ludwig's voice was louder and firmer than Feliciano had yet heard it, but he just shrugged again. Their war, not mine. I don't want to hurt anybody. What did the English ever do to me? English people seem really nice. They wear suits and drink tea and know lots about poetry. I don't want to kill people like that. We shouldn't kill people who know lots about poetry. It's the duty of all young men to fight for their country in wartime. Ludwig said it like he was reciting a script. Is that why you do it? Because it's your duty? Feliciano was genuinely curious. At this, Ludwig paused. He took a few deep breaths like he was thinking. He finally replied, I love my country. What if your country is fighting for the wrong reasons? Did you ever think of that? A spasm of pain seemed to pass over Ludwig's face. He blinked it away. It's not my place to question what my country fights for. Yes, it is. Ludwig looked stunned. By now they had reached the market, emerging from the narrow, overshadowed streets into the wide-open town square. The villagers drew away from them with suspicious and worried looks. Sorry, it's getting late. With suspicious and worried looks at the German officer. Feliciano ignored them and headed straight for the stall where he could see rows of bright vegetables. Oh, look, Ludwig, they have tomatoes after all. Lavina will be so happy. When the stall owner glared at them, somehow looking both angry and terrified, Ludwig discreetly touched Feliciano's elbow and said softly, I will take my leave now. Oh, said Feliciano, feeling disappointed. All right then, but you will meet me tomorrow afternoon by the oak tree, won't you? For a language lesson? Yes. Feliciano was surprised by how fast Ludwig responded. Yes, I will. Oh, good. Ciao! Feliciano immediately reached out to stop Ludwig as he turned to leave. Wait, Ludwig, how do you say goodbye in German? Ludwig paused, turned, and looked down at Feliciano. Auf Wiedersehen, Feliciano. Then he strode off through the surrounding crowd, who parted nervously as he passed. Feliciano waved a goodbye before turning back to the stall owner. The man regarded him suspiciously, though Feliciano was fairly sure he couldn't have understood their words in English. What are you doing chatting with a German, kid? Feliciano shrugged. Nothing? The stall owner's eyes widened in recognition when he saw Feliciano's face, and he nodded, laughing loudly. You're Roma's grandson, aren't you? Of course. What are you planning with that one? He nodded after Ludwig. Unfamiliar anger and annoyance filled Feliciano's gut, but he just smiled. Shh, quietly. Oh, yes, top secret and all that, I understand. Here, was it tomatoes you were after? There aren't many, I'm afraid. After acquiring the tomatoes, some more flour, and even a few oranges, Feliciano left the market. But instead of heading out of the village, he took a turn into a narrow side street. The entrance to the lane was barely noticeable from the outside. He headed down the cobblestones until he reached a wooden battered door, one with a crooked sign hanging overhead that read, Cantina Verde. Walking through the door, it could have been any cantina in Italy. Tables and chairs sat in a common arrangement, a bar ran the length of the back wall, and a few waiters wandered through the room. Feliciano bounced happily through the room and waved at the staff. They barely acknowledged him, something he was used to by now. Secrecy was the order of the day here. Through the back door, behind the kitchen, was another room, one which held some of the most secretive and dangerous meetings in the country. The resistance often gathered in this cantina to discuss matters and plan attacks. And there was a meeting today. The room looked up as Feliciano pushed through the back door. He smiled and again waved happily, but the partisans in attendance were as unresponsive as the waiters out front. Feliciano shrugged to himself and walked into the room. It was just as large as the front area, covered with tables and chairs and looking like a simple function area. There was no evidence to suggest the real purpose of the place. Grandpa Roma stood at the central table and spoke evenly but emphatically to the assembled crowd. The military presence in the village is increasing, and we need to be extra vigilant. I know you all have been careful, but at this time, more than ever... Feliciano quickly lost interest, barely hearing the words go over his head. It was a small gathering today, much smaller than the crowd who had been gathered for the celebration the night before. The atmosphere could not be more different. Everyone on edge and paying complete attention to Roma's every word. Lovino sat on the table, clutching a pistol between his hands and nodding at everything Grandpa Roma said. Feliciano rolled his eyes and wondered if the pistol was even loaded. Lovino really did get carried away sometimes. Feliciano stood watching Roma for a few minutes more, trying to listen but unable to regain concentration. It all sounded the same to him by now, so he walked to the back of the room and turned on the small wireless radio that sat at the back table. Lovino turned and looked at him disapprovingly, but when Feliciano raised the basket of tomatoes for him to see, his mouth twitched in a tiny smile. Roma glanced over and also smiled at him, so Feliciano took it as approval to sit listening to the radio. He tuned it until he found music and leant against the wall, humming the tunes he recognized. He hoped he would not have too long to wait until Grandpa Roma and Lovino were ready to go home. Eventually, a song came through the speakers, an English one that Feliciano had heard a few times but never really listened to. But this time, the first word caught his attention, and he listened intently. I'm going to do the same thing I did in the first chapter and reduce the volume so I can sing the song for you guys. Auf Wiedersehen, auf Wiedersehen, we'll meet again, sweetheart. We'll kiss again, like this again. Don't let the teardrops start. With love, it's true, I'll wait for you. Auf Wiedersehen, sweetheart. It's been a while. I'm not entirely sure that's the right melody. All right. All right. Feliciano smiled. It really was a lovely tune, and he wasn't sure whether it made him happy or sad. Either way, it reminded him of Ludwig. Ludwig, who was so big and looked so imposing, but seemed somehow unsure and even shy. Ludwig, who flew planes and played soccer and had 3 dogs and a brother he worried about. Ludwig, who Feliciano had just met, yet felt like he had known forever. Ludwig, who was part of the German military, occupying Italy, and part of everything that Feliciano was supposed to hate and fight against. Feliciano looked over to see where Grandpa Roma was leaning over a table, outlining a map of the surrounding countryside and speaking forcefully as the partisans looked on. Feliciano sighed to himself and wondered why his eyesight had suddenly blurred. And that is the end of Chapter 2 of Auf Wiedersehen Sweetheart. We're not going to read more than that. Just going to talk about it a little bit, and then we'll call it quits for tonight. Again, pretty classic. The love story is continuing. So Feliciano now knows Ludwig's name, now knows a lot of things about Ludwig. I particularly like how George DeValier speaks about Ludwig's reaction as though they are unusual. Like, Feliciano and Italy in the anime, they kind of push Ludwig/Germany out of his comfort zone because he's so unpredictable to him. And even though we follow Feliciano's point of view, it's really obvious that Ludwig's reaction, being unsure, being a little shy, being like this, is not something that he's used to. He says it several times. Not he says it, but the text suggests it. And I like the difference in their reactions. Ludwig, while we know his character is usually pretty confident and aggressive, here he becomes shy and unsure and gentle. And Feliciano, well, he's a little bit more like himself. Um, in the anime, he's this goofy guy who just talks a lot all the time. Um, and here it's the same thing. But here, what's interesting is that his talking, his questioning, his questions, they reveal his interest. He keeps asking Ludwig to speak about himself, and that shows how interested he is in him. Um, it's We also have the first mention of Gilbert, which is really sad because he will not appear alive in this fan fiction. Sorry for the spoiler, guys, but uh, better. On personally, I prefer to know when a character dies in a fan fiction, uh, and so I prefer to apply this courtesy to you guys. Um, yeah. So yeah, Gilbert. We won't get to meet him in this fic. There are several other fics written by George DeValier where we meet the other characters, namely Gilbert, who has a love story with Roderick. Um, yeah, I think the story they star in is Lily of the Lamplight. And I think it's unfinished. So, if you want to spare yourself the heartache, be my guest. Uh, yeah. Aside from that, what to say? It's funny how different Philly Channel's reaction is. Oh, hello again. My cat is back. It's funny how different Philly Channel's reaction is in this one. How he starts to look sad at the end of the chapter, where he was also happy and dreamy at the end of the first one. And I feel like this really represents a really good part of this fan fiction, which is the blend of romance and tragedy. I mean, of course, it's tragedy. It's World War II. It's violent. It's dangerous, and yeah, some horrible things happen to the characters. Uh, we haven't seen that yet, obviously, but it's a given, and this is kind of foreshadowing that Feliciano starts to cry because he likes this German soldier, but no matter what's going to happen, their relationship, whether it's friendship or love or whatever, he doesn't even know yet, is doomed. They are enemies, and they will be until the war is over. Uh, yeah, and that's also what makes the story so interesting. All right, we're going to stop here for today. I saw that a couple of people were listening, so I'm glad about this. Um, I know that my sweet Lyra was here. Hello again, hun. um, and yeah, I I'm glad. I hope that you enjoy this. My pronunciation maybe is not always the best. I do speak English fluently, but sometimes, the words can get a little jumbled because I live in France, and so English is not the language I speak most in everyday life. I understand it perfectly, but um, speaking it is sometimes a little more complicated. Um, if you enjoyed this, make sure to let me know. You can follow me on my other social media, and check out the project that I have with my sister, which is a project where we are writing a storybook based on the pagan holiday of Litha, the summer solstice. So if you're interested at all, make sure to check out our check out, my info. All right. That's all for me. I hope you have a very nice rest of your day. And, well, if you enjoyed hearing me read, I will be here next week, same time, same place. Bye bye.